Good day. I'm Maria Ressa, and this is Talk Thursday. Today we talk to Peace Panel Chairman Marvic Leonen. Some of the questions we'll ask him: how viable is peace with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front? Why has peace been so elusive? And how near are the parties to signing a deal? These are some of the questions he'll be answering today, the man of the hour. Marvic, please tell us, where are we today on the peace talks?
Well, we are at the final stage of the negotiations. In 2001, the parties, this is the government and the IMILF, signed what is now known as the Tripoli Agreement, where both parties agreed that the talks are going to be incremental. So the first part being that of security concerns. This is the ceasefire and the law enforcement actions against lawless elements. The second part being rehabilitation of conflict-affected areas. The third part being ancestral domain. So we're through with the first two. The security concerns now being implemented through a ceasefire mechanism, which the good news is that it's holding from January to July up till this time. There has been no skirmish between the MILF and the GPH so far. We finished with rehabilitation. And then ancestral domain, well, the parties were at a stalemate initially in 2010. They agreed to move forward simply by considering the agreement as an initial but unsigned document, but both sides agreed to leapfrog to the final part of the series, which is to talk about the final political settlement. So starting last year, the parties negotiated on the substantive points that will go into a final political settlement. And this is the MILF calls it the Bangsamoro question itself.
Yes.
And the government accepts that frame that we are going to solve the Bangsamoro question, which will mean finally, hopefully, ink an agreement at the soonest possible time.
So it looks like you've also agreed then to go back to the 400-year-old, to all of the historical context of it, to try to come up with something that moves forward.
Yes, and as of April, we gave the public a sneak preview.
10 points?
The 10 points, we call them the decision points on principle as of April 2012, which is basically 10 statements of principle, which are very broad, but which is not the complete set of principles that the parties have agreed upon. And a large part of it is that the MILF and the GPH have agreed that what we are talking about is an autonomous political entity in place of the ARMM.
Far more powerful and has more independence than the ARMM, at least from your 10 points. That's
yes,
what it seems like.
Autonomous, genuine autonomy, meaningful autonomy at that. But from the GPH point of view, restoring the flexibilities of our constitution in relation to the autonomous political entity.
Can I ask you about two seemingly sticky points in the 10 points? One is on the economy. How much of their economy, how much of the resources, for example, of the ARMM areas will actually be under the control of this political entity?
That is still being negotiated. There are other points that are not yet covered by the decision points. So the extent of power that will be shared, the competencies of the autonomous government, of course, in relation to what we have now, and that is the Organic Act, then wealth sharing, the sticky question of the geographical scope of the autonomous political entity, and then finally, I think the important component of a transition period towards the autonomous political entity. But perhaps just to inform your viewers and those that follow Rappler.com, that the government, there's a lot of national fund transfer into the ARMM. I think more or less 11 billion in the budget, the current budget, the General Appropriations Act. But in addition to this is an 8 billion stimulus fund under the current budget in order to look at social services, economic infrastructure, and many other aspects that will try to jumpstart the economy in the ARMM so that it catches up with the other parts of the region. I think this is preparatory also to the optimism that is in the peace process.
Who's managing this fund right now? It is
it is also the national with respect to the 8 billion, but there are portions that are partnered with the autonomous region as well as the local government officials.
let me ask you, so another sticking point is in the 10 points, Sharia law. This
Yes.
area will be under Islamic Sharia law.
Yes.
What does that exactly mean?
Well, maybe I should put it in context. The Philippines is under three systems. We have Anglo-American, we have civil law, and then of course we have Sharia. The Code of Muslim Personal Relations, this is a presidential decree, 1083, covers personal relationships among and in between Muslims,
Yes.
whether they are found within the autonomous region or not.
Yes.
Then the Organic Act, this is Republic Act 9054, has already acknowledged more general competencies of Sharia. So I think this is not new. It is only to make it more effective. For instance, in terms of the implementation of Sharia law,
Yes.
there are certain courts that needs to be established still. There are certain aspects of Sharia law which have to be clarified. Maybe certain portions of the Code of Muslim Personal Relations that need to be amended so that it is more in keeping with Islamic jurisprudential thought.
I think the difficulty there is, what if I am a Christian living in this new political entity? Will I be under criminal law or Sharia law?
Definitely not, because in all systems where there is a mixed coverage, there will always be a portion there called conflicts of laws provisions, which will mean that if a Muslim is married to a Christian or a Christian married to a Muslim, then definitely there will be rules that will cover the applicability of the law. Much like when a foreigner marries a Filipina,
Yes.
then there Article 17 of our Constitution, of the Civil Code, actually says that the laws of the Filipina will follow her in terms of her marital relations with a foreigner. Now, if the foreigner's laws are different, or it points back to the laws of the Filipina, then we would follow that law. But in any case, there will be conflicts provisions.
I know I'm asking you about too many details. Let me pull out right now. December last year, it seemed like it was at another deadly impasse, and then this year it switched dramatically. I know that the president spoke with the head of the MILF as well, with Chairman Murad. But what's changed now? Why are you, in your words, cautiously optimistic?
Yes. First, I think the meeting of the president with Murad, August of last year, this was almost a year ago,
Yes.
I think solidified the impression of the MILF, especially its leadership, that the president is sincere.
Yes.
Sincere in the sense that he's wanting an agreement. This is not talk for the purposes of just keeping the talks going.
Yes.
They know that the president talks turkey. That is, that the president will do what he promises, and he will not promise something that he will not do. Something which I think is a lesson from our past experiences in negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
That there were instances where existing administrations thought that the next administration would be responsible for the implementation.
Mm-hmm.
This president, in fact, told Chair Murad that what he wants is to implement the agreement, therefore to sign it as early as possible. And during the negotiations, the president asked us to clarify to the MILF that not only are we supposed to be able to implement within this 6-year period, but we are supposed to be able to assess so that we can adjust a little if necessary, in order that the next administration will continue the momentum of change in the autonomous political entity.
But after that August meeting, there was a point where it dropped and it
Yes.
became quite icy. And
Yeah, I think it's natural that when the parties go further into details,
yes.
that some of their expectations will not be met. But for so long as we keep to the our eyes on the goal and the frame of the negotiations, and at the end of it, whether the leaders trust each other, then therefore it will recover. So I think those moments where the public got the impression that there were an impending stalemate can probably be charged to the fact that we are working on the details, and that the parties are passionate about their positions on certain matters regarding the detail.
The devil is in the details.
Yes,
You
I
said
think
this
much
yourself.
of the difficulty in political negotiation is to determine how much detail you want to talk about in a peace agreement.
Correct.
Because the parties have to understand that after the peace agreement is signed, that there will be a process of, I call it legalization
Correct.
of the peace agreement, which will mean that we will have to have the critical political mass, both of the public and in the proper legislative chambers, if necessary,
Yes.
to pass the necessary law. So,
So this is more of a strategic framework, and then it gets implemented later on.
probably it will be a more strategic framework compared with other peace processes abroad. But this also goes into the perceptions of the MILF with respect to what can happen in government with a popular president. Of course, on our end, we know the reality of government administration. We are in touch with cabinet secretaries and the legislature. We are in dialogue with some senators and some members of the House of Representatives. And I think this is what is new with the Aquino panel,
Okay.
that we are at the same time, while we're waiting for instructions from the president and briefing him, we are also in conversation with other parts of the entire government,
Yes.
in order to avoid the mistake of the MOA AD, where everyone was caught by surprise.
Right.
So we are trying to assess how viable some of the commitments are, or the requests of the MILF would be, and the MILF, I think, is trying to gauge the extent towards they can push a hard commitment on very detailed matters in the negotiation.
Well, let me ask you about the MILF now. And part of the problem in the past negotiations, it's been 14 years now
Yes.
that these negotiations have been going on. But part of the problem in the past was that the MILF was also harboring terrorists, Jamaat Islamiyah at some point. And there was a point when they kicked them out in 2005. But intelligence sources tell me that these two JI terrorists, Marwan and Muawiyah, are now back in central Mindanao in areas that the MILF control. What do you do with this?
Well, first, maybe on the specific point of those two individuals, I will just say no comment for now, and that probably this is a matter that must be validated by our intelligence services. However, in 2006, the MILF committed, actually, to assist government interdict lawless elements, and this is via an ad hoc joint action group. Also, I think it's a reality that many of those that are lawless do have relatives
Yes.
within communities where the MILF may be influential or dominant, and therefore that it may be natural that in some of these instances they would come home or seek succor under their protection. But definitely, the government has turned over to the MILF a list of its high-value targets, and we hope that the MILF soon enough will keep to their commitments in 2006 in relation to the interdiction of many of the lawless elements that the government is after.
Well, we certainly did see a shift from the leadership of Hashim Salamat to Ibrahim Al-Haj Murad. We saw that shift. But the question now is this leadership, is the MILF united enough to be able to control?
That is we hope so, but with that hope, of course, is a constant monitoring of what is happening on the ground. You remember, Maria, there was this incident regarding Ustad Ameril
Yes.
Umbrakato.
So the breakaway faction.
The breakaway faction, we assessed,
Yes.
and we saw that it was not too big, and that, of
About
course,
200 men, right? Is what you're talking about, or less?
200 to 400.
To 400. Oh,
Depends
wow.
on the source that you have. But these
Okay.
are composed of sub-commanders, some sub-commanders that our intelligence network actually knows.
Yes.
And therefore assessing the strength of the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters, and also assessing what the MILF would do. At the end of the day, they did what government did, which was actually to say that they are not covered by any of the ceasefire agreements.
Correct.
And so far to date, they have not committed any atrocity, except for some wayward individuals, and except for some Rido incidents. So therefore, we are constantly also assessing the levels of unity of the MILF. By the way, the MILF is going to have a major consultation in
This
Dalapanan
weekend.
this weekend.
Correct.
And that's part of the assessment. Perhaps
Yes.
we can see how much following the MILF still
Yes.
has. And government, as a matter of policy, is supportive of these consultations.
Yes.
Whatever it takes for the MILF to convince all their constituency that what has been agreed at the negotiating table is something that is realistic, but at the same time will serve the foundation to meet some of their aspirations, is something that the government will support.
Well, it's also worth noting to say that in the past, the MILF has actually, in many areas of Mindanao, been a better force for governance than the government itself, than the local government. Would you agree with a statement like that?
I wouldn't say generally, and I would not admit that for now. But the point is that it is true that the MILF, I think, is seeing the possibility that there may be a final political settlement. And along with it, I predict, like any other revolutionary force, they want to prepare for governance.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, their peace panels have gone out of their way to actually make presentations with non-Moro traditional constituents.
Yes.
So they have gone here to Makati. They have talked even to the diplomatic community to explain
To the business community.
to the business
Yeah,
community what
correct.
their positions are. And I think you see here partly a wish on the part of a major part of their leadership that they will want something out of these negotiations. I think the leadership of the MILF tends to be more practical nowadays. They see the political opportunities under the present administration. They see that whatever points that we bring at the negotiating table, that may be it. Which means that we are giving them the maximum available that we see is possible under the political setup that we have right now.
What about what's happening right now with Umbracato? I mean, is he going to splinter off to another group? I mean, are we going to see a peace agreement with the MILF only to see splinters of extremist groups coming up later on?
Okay, with Umbracato, we know that some of his sub-commanders have returned to the MILF. We also know that he is seriously ill, and we are watching the developments.
Yes.
Or more particularly, I think the AFP and the PNP are watching the developments in relation to the BIFF. But they are not really a force to contend with,
To deal with right now.
to deal with right now.
Too few. They're too. Is there a generational gap? Are you seeing a generational gap in the MILF?
Well, not enough to make that conclusion, but
Okay.
certainly there may be different perspectives from elder leaders carrying the same ideology with younger leaders. But I think it is not. I would be cautious to make that conclusion.
The MILF leadership has actually said at certain points that the younger guys tend to be a little bit more hot-headed, or a little more, can be more extremist.
Yes.
Do you agree with this, or?
I would validate that. I would
Okay.
try to find out whether that is true. And in fact, we are
Okay.
actually trying to validate that. You know, Maria, this panel, upon instructions of the President, we did our homework.
Yes.
We even did a survey of the entire area that is affected by the negotiations or might be affected by the negotiations. So we have numbers that guides us in terms of our position. Separate survey that is done. And as a matter of fact, we offered to the MILF, why don't we conduct a joint survey? And a survey done by social scientists. And this is possible already in the Philippines. Actually, it
Yes.
is done on a very regular basis.
Correct.
And we offer that the resources of government will be used, not in order to inform us as to what the politically negotiated settlement will be, but for us to be accurate about our understanding of how people feel as of the moment.
In the areas that are affected. Let me
Yes,
ask you
yes.
about the shortcomings, the shortfalls on the government side. I mean, in 2010, for sure, the MILF said that there was no political will from the Philippine government. And then when you came in, there was the panel had a short-lived, there was a burst of great optimism on both sides, I thought, even from the panel of the MILF. Well, and then it fell down, and now both of you are talking about cautious optimism. Does this government have the political will to carry this through? What are you willing to give up?
Well, certainly number one, something which is politically acceptable and viable, something which our economy can bear, something which maintains territorial integrity and national sovereignty, and something which explores the flexibilities of our constitution, and something which learns from the history of these negotiations, learning from the lessons of the past.
Okay.
So, well, I think the optimism is from the idea that this is a president that will not run for a second term, will not use this mechanism as a vehicle for his own personal ambitions. This is a president that has shown, in terms of good governance, that he can put everything on the line. We just saw it in the impeachment of very high officials
Yes.
that has happened. And of course, in the cleanup of the ARMM government that is now underway. So therefore, I think that is where the optimism really is coming
So
from.
you have political will at the top. We saw that with his meeting with Chairman Murad. But what about the perennial problem at the bottom, which is the local government, the Christian landowners who don't want to let go of their lands? How are you dealing with these?
Well, I'm happy to say that we have been in touch with most of the municipal mayors. We have conducted consultations with them, and soon enough we will try to complete that first level of consultation. We can go to a second round of consultation with municipal mayors, governors, and even the people that you call vigilantes or Christian vigilantes. We have touch base with
You're
some
talking
of
to
them.
them.
We have had a conversation with them, and surprisingly, it is not far off from what is possible with the MILF.
Okay.
I think a lot of this is misunderstanding. The MILF is not saying that they're going to confiscate Christian lands. I think very clear they are saying that they're going to respect vested property rights.
Okay.
I think it is from that source that there were conflagrations in Mindanao in 2008. The misimpression
Yes.
that there will be a turnover of many of the private properties that were already covered by titles to others. But certainly here, definitely it will not happen.
Let me throw some questions at you, Marvic, that are coming in from social media. From @Dance Moves, what are the main misconceptions of the general public on the concept of peace? How should we think about it?
Yes, peace is a result. Because peace is a result, we should not see it as the main goal. The main goal, I think, is to bring a just settlement that is also lasting, which means not only must we address aspirations of people in the area, but also that it be something that is workable. So I think when you talk to everybody is for peace.
Yes.
Even those that carry arms are for peace.
Yes.
And they carry arms because they want to maintain peace. But on the other hand, what are the causes of the armed conflict as of the moment? I think it is basically according them justice. And that means that allowing a national minority within a territorially delimited area the kind of autonomy envisioned by our very constitution. There are flexibilities in our constitution, only 6 provisions in our constitution, allowing a lot of leeway
Yes.
in order that the people in the area can govern themselves. Of course, workable in the sense that there must be a plan for financial sustainability also in that area.
Another question from social media @Rex Sorsa. How much of MILF and groups who are reclaiming the Bangsamoro homeland is actually sitting with the government of the Philippines? How will we honor the accord?
We are confident that we are talking to the Central Committee of the MILF that has charged over 18 base commands of about 11,000 men with the same amount of firearms. We are going to honor the accord in the way that the President said. We will only promise that which we can do. Hopefully that is something that sets the foundation for further changes in the future. And perhaps there will be milestones in the agreement, and this can be checked by monitors,
Yes.
or this can be checked by civil society at large, or even by the 2 panels.
Fantastic. What about a potential big spoiler, the MNLF? I mean, a peace agreement was signed in 1996, and
Yes.
yet it really hasn't, come to the vision that was supposed to have happened since then. And what's going to happen if the MILF gets a better deal than
Yes.
the MNLF?
The good news is that we are seeing what the government has been saying at the very beginning. This government has been saying at the very beginning. We want to see a convergence of interests of the MNLF and the MILF by heightened conversations or dialogues between the MILF leadership and the MNLF leadership. And Maria, it's happening.
Really?
That in Jeddah in December of last year, there was a meeting of the Miswari
Group, yes.
and the Murad Group. It was a 3-on-3 meeting to our knowledge, and the results are varied. And then there are also meetings that have been conducted with the other groups within the MNLF, the Council of 15 with the leadership of the MILF, some in Darapanan, and they are in constant conversation.
Some intelligence sources are actually picturing Nur Miswari as a potential spoiler because he's upset that the MILF will get a better deal. How does this work?
The MILF has always said that they are going to build on what the MNLF has gotten, and that they are not going to undermine the fundamental principles of the final peace agreement because they see it as positive, but then they want to move a little bit further. So it is the final political settlement will be something more. Of course, because it's something more than that, we are hopeful that it will be more politically acceptable. If there is any splinter group, then that
Yes.
splinter group will be dealt with as a law enforcement action.
So bringing it to law enforcement, part of the problem has really been the lack of law and order in this area. That's part of the reason you also have so many men with guns. How will you work this now when we have if we have a peace agreement?
That is one part which we will not forget, because that is not in the final peace agreement with the MNLF.
Yes.
We call that, and the MILF also calls it, the MILF started the label normalization.
Okay.
Within normalization, from the point of view of government, that includes perhaps both, apart from weapons disposal, weapons reduction, it will, and DDR, it also includes livelihood, it also includes law enforcement,
Yes.
the restructuring of our security forces within that specific area.
What we're seeing right now, though, is really there's been technology transfer from terrorists to the Filipino groups. And so we're seeing a nexus shaping between terrorism and crime. And how will this function within the context of a peace process? How will you deal with these groups that are criminal, that are carrying out acts that are criminal in nature, but using tactics that they've learned from
Yes.
terrorist groups?
We are seeing that the MILF understands this. We are seeing that they are aware that there is that nexus which you described, and that in an agreement that we are going to craft, that it should be a major part of the normalization process, that there are many other armed groups with certain capabilities that needs to be addressed. So we are hoping that that will be a major part of that specific agenda.
There hasn't been a clash this whole year so far, right? Between, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
between the GPH and
The
MI, but
GPH
let
and
me
the
qualify that, Maria.
Please.
There has been clash. There have been some armed skirmishes.
Okay,
But this is in the nature of RIDO,
I see.
land
Clan
conflicts.
war, land.
Yes.
Okay.
This is also in the nature of some improvised explosive devices that have gone off. Many of them may be politically related, maybe
Right.
not. And then there are also the kidnappings that have happened there.
And that's where I was going to bring
Yes.
you. So the kidnapping, some of the members or former members of the MILF have been implicated in these kidnappings. How will this play out? I mean, again, it's connected to law and order issues, but who would deal with it?
Yes. National government, when it will come into an agreement with the MILF, will not just leave the area.
Okay.
The police forces will not just leave the area. The armed forces will not just leave the area. They, of course, the MILF should expect that there will be some level of partnership between the autonomous political entity and the experienced law enforcement agencies that
Right.
we have.
So it won't be like the way it is today, which is there are boxes of there are areas that only the MILF will police and areas that the armed forces will
Yes.
police. I mean, is this still going to be that segmentized in that way?
Yes. Well, let me just attack that on different levels.
Please.
The first one is, assuming that there are indeed boxes, the agreement will remove this. But
Okay.
even now, the boxes are not really that tight. It is porous.
Yes, correct.
Because you have the ad hoc joint action group.
Yes.
And it was only in 2010 when it was fully activated. So, as a matter of fact, there have been meetings between the two teams of the MILF and the government. We have given them a list. We said this is our priority. We have leads as to certain individuals. And sooner or later, we are pushing the MILF, and hopefully with their acquiescence, that we will be able to actually conduct law enforcement actions. I just want to clarify, none of our ceasefire agreements waive the ability of government to perform law enforcement actions. But many of them, many of its provisions ensure that none of the law enforcement actions will have the MILF as a collateral damage, which means therefore that there
I
is
see.
some level of coordination and notification
Excellent.
here. What makes it complicated, of course, again, is the fact that we're talking to communities, and
Yes.
some of the lawless elements are amorphous and can blend well with the actual communities. So we are conducting law enforcement under those conditions.
What about drug trafficking? I mean, who will deal with things like this? The MILF or the government of the Philippines?
That's still under negotiations.
So these are still.
Yes, but definitely there will be a portion where there is a transition period.
Yes.
That definitely there has to be, well, I think there's what is called the principle of subsidiarity,
Yes.
where the more local the problem, the more power a local government should have.
Correct.
And only when necessary. That's why you have a central government or a national government to support you in terms of your effort. But in order to get to that point, there has to be capability building, resource generation, and some awareness of the problem.
Correct.
The intricacies of the issue involved, like drug trafficking. It is not as simple as identifying where the traffickers are, and you know this better than anyone else. And therefore, it's still under negotiations. And hopefully, what we come out with is something, again, that is pragmatic, but setting the stage for more meaningful autonomy in the future.
What's so interesting in the way you've been talking about it, and even the phrase that we want to make sure the MILF is not collateral damage. It's the kind of backbone that you've put. Is it fair to say, you know, when I speak with Mohakher Iqbal, he actually seems to put great faith in you. And you also seem to, is this part of the reason that we're moving forward now is because of the trust of the actual people involved in negotiating this? Is that different?
I hope so, that helps. But what I found out, Maria, is that this is a collective effort and the trust must be collective also.
I see.
What I see is that the MILF has repeated several times in crucial moments that they trust the sincerity of the President. They may not agree with what some of the things that we are bringing to the negotiating table, and hence the passionate negotiations that we've had. But on the other hand, I think it's more collective in that sense. Of course, again, we are guarded. We are constantly monitoring the leadership of the MILF, as they may be monitoring the leadership of the GPH and trying to make sense of the actions that are reported in media. And hopefully, we hope that media is reporting more accurately than usual in terms of these negotiations.
Well, we're certainly trying our best.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Marvic, for joining us. We went through the whole gamut of a lot of material. If you have any more questions, Marvic Leonen is on Twitter at Marvic Leonen, and you can also post your questions on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about the prospects of peace, cautious optimism on both sides. Let's cross our fingers. I'm Maria Ressa. This is Talk Thursday on Rappler.